So, Narelle, in a previous video, we talked about counting forwards in ones and so forth, and all the sub skills involved in that. It was actually more complex than you might imagine. So, what we'd like to do in this short video is just focus on counting backwards. So, if you'd like to take us through a sequence for that, that'd be really neat.
That would be lovely. So, if we look down here at the visualizer.
Okay, so let's head down there.
Yes, great. In the last video, we practiced about touching and saying to make the connection between the physical block, the said word, and the written number or numeral. So we're going to do that same thing when we go backwards. So we can use this set of stairs, and if you remember in the counting forwards video, children quite liked making the pyramid. We have a similar thing when we count backwards. So sort of the first activity before we get into the teaching is the exploratory play, and we'll start with the 5. And to count backwards, to put, if you're going to build up like a tower.
And children love building up too.
It's great. And the blocks have got a nice dimension about them that
they
they're reasonably
can fit,
stable.
Not going to fall on,
Okay, so we're building a tower where each level is one less or one shorter. So we're getting that
yes, about language, because we talked about the issue with language and different words meaning the same thing. Well, it gets difficult for them.
It does, and so they tend to build up, which is lovely in this natural pyramid, very symmetrical shape. And by counting backwards, it forces us, by building up, it forces you to count backwards.
Because you can't put a longer one on it.
Not very stably, anyway. So then we get this idea, and we can talk about that's great to get the stable order of going backwards, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But again, we want to move them from this idea to the idea that this time, in the counting sequence, each number, as we count backwards, is one less.
Okay, and that's where the length comes in again. It's not as long, and in fact, it's not as long by 1 unit.
By 1 unit, that's right. So that's why, and we want to be explicit to them about why we want the steps arrangement, because we're trying to show that each number is reducing by 1, getting smaller by 1. So then the first formal activity after that is the counting backwards, where I'm making sure I'm touching and saying. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you.
Okay, same thing. So I'm going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Excellent.
Yeah, I noticed that this is very similar to what you did before when we counted forward. So we've got the same basic model in mind.
And that's what we want. We want the procedural fluency with the activity so that the student's mind is open to focus on the mathematics. So then after that, we're going to do the same thing and count backwards and touch, but I'm going to replace them as you go.
And you're covering them, so you don't have to prompt them.
Just can't read them all.
Okay, so 4. Or did you want me to say 5 first?
Start with 5 and touch
as you go. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good.
Now, do you ever get any children talk about 0?
Yeah, 0 is a very natural place for this to come in. And 0 would be here because it's a way of saying we don't have a block. There is no block.
Okay. I have heard a young child call this number blast off.
Blast off.
Which makes sense.
It really does, And I think sometimes a lot of the charts we see go from 1 to 10, and by putting that 0 in there, it's
But that's a big conceptual jump.
It is a big because it's not physical. Yes. So after we get the fluency with the stable order and that 1-to-1 of counting backwards, the next thing we want to do is that missing number. You have to close your eyes again. Okay, now you can open your eyes.
Okay.
And this time count backwards, touching as you go.
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
That's right. And then close your eyes. Okay. And this time, because Paul seems to have mastered that, you can open your eyes. We'll make it a little bit more difficult.
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So now we had a discussion before about the different words here. So where would something like the word between come and those sort of things?
That would come with the missing number.
Okay, so we start to about what number becomes between.
And
now you mentioned missing number, so tell us a bit more about that.
So with that missing number and between, you can do it from 2 perspectives. One, you could do it from the perspective of the 3, so you can say 3 is between, or you can take it the other way. what is the number between 2 and 4.
Okay, so in a sense, one's a question and one's a statement. And you've been very explicit about the language here. And I think sometimes one of the issues going from concrete to representational is the language throws children out a little bit. So,
and if we're just, a nice way to be able to do it is that same missing number, but I take this out, and then I've just got 2 something. 4.
That reminds me of some of the assessments that you did.
Yeah. So that is hitting that abstract level.
Wow, I was going to say that's a big jump.
But, so you want to be quite confident with the representational first before we get onto that. So now that you seem to be fluent counting backwards with a missing number, we're going to try to count backwards from any number.
Okay, yep.
So in order to do this, I'll ask you to close your eyes.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting good at closing
closing your eyes. Okay, you can open your eyes now.
Yeah.
And I've split the steps, but I've hid different numbers to before. So this time, start at 4.
Okay, so this one I'm not going 5, 4.
No,
okay.
Start
so I'm holding the 4.
Yes,
but
please.
I say 3, 2, 1.
That's right. And you can see that's very different to rattling off 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, because it's
which is just the stable order. We're trying to combine that with that 1-to-1 correspondence there. So now that, and we would close your eyes and split the steps, and we would do it from different numbers. Once we're fluent counting backwards from any number, then we can do the very similar activity, but we're going to specifically teach that word before.
Okay, yep. Okay. So that's where this language starts to come.
Yeah, and children with language difficulties tend to understand the word next.
Yes,
and next, it is the next one, but it's actually the next one before.
Okay, yeah.
So again, we would split the steps. Close your eyes, and I would say, Paul, what is the number that comes before 3?
Okay, so in fact, interesting because I'm thinking a number that comes after, but
and that's that idea of next.
So I'm going to say 2.
2, and I gave you a visual prompt there by touching, but the next stage would be just to use the verbal and say, what is the number before 3?
Wow, this is very step by step. Obviously, working with young children.
Yes, that's right, and I think seeing that difference between the prompt and not the prompt, and similarly, you can imagine if you'd been counting backwards all week. And you presented this activity, they would be fresh on counting backwards. But if you split the steps in a couple of weeks and they've done forwards and backwards, they really have to know that word before and after.
Okay, and partly here, you're also doing a bit of differentiation.
Very much.
By you
just
judging.
It's simple, but it's, giving that extra information. So that's the sequence. We've applied it from forwards to backwards just with numbers to 5, and then of course we go up to 10.
Okay, so look, thanks very much for just that little overview. I know it's fairly quick, but obviously people can pause and rewatch part of the video. And that sort of linear model, seeing the numerals, all of those links happening, just shows how explicit you need to be with the young children though.
And how complex.
It's not just...
It's not just identifying 8 or 5 or 4, it's how they live in relation to other numbers.
Well, it's not just rattling off all your numbers, because I've seen some children say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like one big long word as opposed to understanding the length. So something as simple as counting is actually quite complex. So thanks, Narelle.
Lovely, thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time.
Fun. Okay. Thanks.